recording. Great. And share screen to let me know if you can see the presentation with the big HITM. Just give me a verbal yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate that. So
Yes.
here we go. Remember that not everything here that we're going to talk about today that you may not been exposed to, but potentially down the road, these are some areas that you could delve into based on what your personal, path is. Please don't try to, just kind of deflect it. I want to make sure that you at least have a good understanding of it, and I'll tell you which things will be on the exam. This will be more on the exam at the end, which is what we call the certified hospitality supervisor. Remember, formulas, you don't have to memorize formulas. They're going to give you the formula and then they're going to give you the variables. You just got to know where the variables go, how the formulas work. Okay? So let's get into that. So today, we're going to talk about these things: menu item pricing, food and beverage pricing. Somebody have a question? No? Okay. You might want to turn your microphone on mute until you have a question. We want to explain the relationship between price, value, and cost. Explain the methods managers use to establish food and beverage prices, and then things that go into menu pricing. We'll talk some about that. Wow, what's going on here? It's not happening. There we go. Okay. We're going to describe some of the procedures used to analyze menu sales mix, state the process used to adjust menu items and prices, what items to put on the menu for profitability, forecasting and budgeting basics. We're going to talk about preparing food and labor budgets. We're going to talk about budgeting for profit, managing for profit. So budgeting for profit and then making sure that we're doing the things that we budgeted for, and then managing what we call our variance. So a lot of these things we touched on last time. We're just going to go a little bit deeper this session. So week 6, part 2, understanding food cost, forecasting, estimating, understanding labor cost, optimizing labor productivity, scheduling, and revenue collection and security. Understanding our food costs, right? So we want to define what food cost is. We want to calculate the cost of sales, calculate our food cost percentage, which is important, which we'll use in our collection. And remember, we talked about this the last time, is that a lot of this is handled by your point of sale system. We just want you to know the background on how to get to these numbers if you had to, so that you really understand what's going on in your own facility. So what is food cost? Okay, it's really the dollar value of the food that's used by an operation during a specific time. Because when we do an analysis, there's different time frames that we use. It can be a week, it can be a couple of weeks, it can be a month, certainly a quarter, or a season, depending on the type of operation that you're involved with. Many of my restaurants and wineries up north in Traverse City are very seasonal, so they really, from about April, late March, early April, till about middle to end of October, that's kind of their season. So they really have that specific price or specific analysis based on those months. We also want to make sure that when we're talking food costs, we're defining it properly. A lot of people mix and match. Sometimes they mean the same. Food cost equals cost of sales. Okay, so the two types of costs that are involved in food costs are food and beverage, except when it's really, you need to separate them out. You really want to understand these two particular categories, because to lump them together, sometimes we can't get as good a story as we possibly could unless we separate those things out. So understanding our beverage costs alone, understanding our food costs alone will really help out so that we can do an analysis and understand, maybe there's shrinkage, or there's something that's not right. And by separating these two out, as a beverage cost, food cost is the cost of sales. So you have to be clear. When somebody says cost of sales, you really want to come back with a question like, does that include food and beverage, or is that just food, right? So understand what's going on there. Questions, comments there? Okay. So understanding the food costs, it all starts with when you order in purchasing, right? And then when you order, did we get the products that we ordered in? And is those products, are they everything we ordered? And are they in decent shape? That means when they were shipped, is there any damage? Is there any spoilage? Anything like that? So we want to make sure that when we get these in, we're checking, whoever's responsible for checking the food in and putting it in inventory, we're doing a good job, right? So again, understanding to check to see if we receive the right items, and then again, making sure that we're cross-checking our order or our PO or whatever your system is, and then make sure that we put them in inventory the proper way. This will help control the food costs, right? So that we're ordering the proper amounts. We have to, it's a little bit of an art and a science here, is that we just don't, consistently order the same amounts of food. It's just based on what's going on, what our clients have ordered, especially if you're in the event and catering business and that kind of stuff. So again, the proper amounts could vary. A lot of times though, you depending on the time of the seasons that you're open, a lot of this is going to be somewhat consistent, but there's always some variable. We're also trying to, when we're talking about controlling food costs, eliminate waste, right? Mistakes that we make, we've cut it wrong, or we've damaged something, or it's a spoilage because we didn't keep track of expiration dates, either in the cooler or on the shelves. So again, trying to eliminate waste. And then mindful of how long perishable food sits in inventory. So again, trying to make sure that we have our arms around this whole thing. You should have systems in place that puts it right in front of your face if you're in this responsibility, if this is an area of your responsibility, to make sure that you're moving things, that we use the oldest stuff first, as long as it's not expired. But again, making sure that we're doing the right things to reduce waste if we can. So more on reducing waste and theft, right? What kind of security techniques do we have? And that can run the gamut. So as we go down here, you'll see some of the different areas that people use or incorporate to make sure they reduce the waste and or theft. So security techniques to keep food from spoiling, to keep food from being stolen. You want to make sure that you're checking in with employees from time to time. Again, making sure you get a good idea of their demeanor. Are they upset, or are they, you want to make sure that you're giving them a voice, that they're being heard, because it could open the possibility that they could be taking stuff out the back door, that type of thing. So it's always good to check in with employees just to make sure that they know that they have an ear and that they have what they need. Questions, comments there? Okay. So we monitor, right? Dishes. If you've in the middle of a busy dinner, or lunch or even breakfast or whatever, and we start to notice that some dishes are being returned during the service, we need to really stay on top of that. Like, what's going on? Is stuff not being cooked properly? Are orders not being completed properly? Why are our guests returning the food to the kitchen? And we need to make a note of it so that we can correct it as quickly as possible and not let it go on. So we want to note those reasons for those returns, right? So we want to monitor that. We also want to make sure that we do a consistent job of monitoring the portion sizes. There's been exercises done where they had 4 or 5 people in the kitchen just say, okay, measure out 6 ounces of pulled pork and put it on a plate. And believe it or not, the estimates were all over the place because people don't have a good idea, nor do they have to. If we have the right tools that they can use, that they know that this is 6 ounces, if I put it in this particular measuring or on a scale, they can be more accurate. But if they have to eyeball it, that's going to affect portion sizes, and in turn, that's going to affect how quickly or not quickly that we use the food that we've prepared. So, and some of those tools can include a scoop, any ladles that you have, serving spoons, serving dishes, the ramekins, bowls, and cups that you might use, and of course, portion scales. Again, there's a reason that we started off this whole class with looking at a recipe sheet that if we don't follow the recipe and we don't put the proper measurements or portion sizes in the recipe, that it could drastically change the quality, the taste, the quality, consistency of the food. So again, trying to make sure that we're on top of our portion sizes, using the tools that are provided, as opposed to trying to eyeball that or ballpark that. And that goes the same with the alcohol portion too. If we're just trying to eyeball it, we don't have those the technology on the top of the bottles to let us know what a shot is and what a shot isn't. Again, we could really mess up the cost, the beverage cost, and our profit margin is not going to be nearly as high. Another mechanism that you could use, things like pre-portioning, right? Make stuff ahead of time. The only downside with that is that if you made too many, then there could be the possibility that you won't use that pre-portioned pre-portioned portion right away. So there could be some spoilage. Maybe you could save it, put it in the cooler, or those types of things. So we want to make sure, and then if we don't make enough, then right in the middle of your service, you got to ramp things back up and change the rhythm of the kitchen and that type of thing. So again, you could do some pre-portioning. You could also buy some pre-portioned stuff. So again, it just depends on what's going on there. And really, employees, they're really trying to follow your menu specifications correctly, right? So we want to make sure that they're doing that. And that's all part of the recipe, that this much goes in, no more, no less, right? And then as we plate the meals and we get it out to the dining room, that we have the right portions on the tray. There's a chef, or there might be multiple chefs that have went through a large process of creating the menu, creating the meals. And again, they put the right portions in there, and they certainly need to be followed so that everything runs smoothly. Questions, comments there? We're going to talk about analyzing your food costs as far as what's on the menu. Should we move menu items that aren't selling? That's certainly one alternative. Might not be the best alternative, but there are certainly better spots on the menu than others. So it really should be talked about before you move menu items to different parts of the menu. Maybe you create combos for slower moving stuff, whether it's creating a combo of sandwich and soups, or other types of things that you could create. Certainly that the kitchen can get creative on that. You can also create on your menu buy one, get one deals, right? Especially if you've got some food that you need to use up, but you don't want to take a kind of a loss on that because you may have to throw it away. So again, as long as it's within the expiration date, we can create those buy one, get one deals to move some of our food inventory. Communications is always important, right? From the front of the house, the wait staff and host and bussers to the back of the house, right? They should be in constant communication, because if something breaks down, everybody needs to know what's going on so that we can either, we need to change course, pivot, or stop altogether based on what's happening. So, as we said at the beginning, food cost is the actual dollar value of food used by an operation during a certain period. Not a markup, that's our revenue or our sales cost. This is what it actually costs our operation to buy it from our suppliers or vendors, okay? This includes any cost of food sold, right? Given away, any food wasted, spoiled, incorrectly prepared. Again, not expecting perfection. So sometimes, oops, we made a mistake and now we have to throw some of that stuff away. Maybe we've overportioned something, we've overproduced something, or somebody's stolen it, okay? Inventory becomes a huge area that we need to make sure that we understand and we have our arms around this. So it's really the dollar value of food product in storage, and can be expressed in terms of units, values, or both. So this is the beginning of the formula that we'll use to understand what inventory is. So opening inventory, pretty straightforward here, is the physical inventory at the beginning of a given period. It's just where we're starting, right? Closing inventory, we take inventory at the end of a given period, depending on if we're doing it 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever we're doing, we have the opening inventory and the closing inventory. So we're going to do the formula for obtaining an actual food cost is the following formula. So opening inventory plus any purchases that has happened during that time that we're taking our inventory from the opening inventory to the closing inventory, because it may have already hit the shelves, it may not have, but this is something that's a cost to us. So our open inventory is whatever on the shelf, right? Plus any incoming food and beverages, minus any closing inventory, whatever's left on the shelf. That's our cost of sales. So we can get a pretty good number. And that's why I said on the exam, they're going to give you that formula. We just got to know where to pump those in and do the math there. So we'll put some numbers to this. So on a monthly time frame, if we've got that formula, here's some numbers that we can plug in here. So if we have an opening inventory of $2,500 worth of inventory, plus we know that we've just purchased $6,500, and then our closing inventory is $1,800. So we minus that out of the equation. That is our cost of sales. So if we drop that down, our cost of sales for that time period is $7,200, because our 25 and 65 added together is 9, minus our $1,800 of closing inventory, we get $7,200. That's what we're going to use to use as our cost of sales. Questions, thoughts, comments there? So now now that we got our sales cost, our food cost, let's talk about our food cost percentage. It's the relationship between the sales and the cost of food to achieve those sales. So we know that the lower the percentage, the higher our margin. So if we can keep our costs down, and there's only so much that you can do because we're certainly buying food from suppliers and the like, but if you can keep your costs down, the margin will go up. You'll realize higher profits, right? And that's the name of the game. Not to some stupid level, but we're trying to do it where it makes sense, because we still have to have, from the kitchen, we still have to have high output of quality. Otherwise, you're going to have guests that aren't going to come back. So again, trying to make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure that our cost is down, therefore our cost percentage is down. So you might, depending on the size and the process that your facility does things, you already may be given a company standard that you need to hit as a manager. That your food cost percentage needs to be at 25% or 18% or 21%. They may give that to you and say, that's historically what we've done here at this facility and we want you to hit that. Or we look back at our historical costs, maybe same time last year during the springtime or in the month of March, we're just comparing the two, or just in industry standards overall. Where is everybody else at? To see if we can hit those numbers. But again, typically a company knows and understands where they're at, and there's small variables, but again, for the most part, it's pretty consistent. So don't know how you guys do it, but there's 3 different areas that we can really pull from to understand and compare how well we're doing when it comes to food cost and food cost percentage. So another formula here to determine the percentage, you take that total food cost, which we've figured out, we have a formula for that, and you divide that by the sales. So pretty straightforward. Over that same time period, if we did a monthly, and you saw it, I think it was $7,200 on the previous, now we take it by what we've brought in by serving the client, paid their bills or paid their invoices, their checks, and then we total that up for the same time period. Now we can get our percentage. So there's the formula. And we know food cost is a variable cost. And the reason it is that our food costs will go up and down based on how well the facility is doing. If they've got a lot of people in the dining room, our food cost is probably going to go up, right? But also, we're serving more food, that means more revenue is going to come in. So it's really in direct proportion. If you're slow, your food cost, you're not going to cook as much food, so your food cost stays low, but your food cost is going to go up. What we're trying to understand is making sure that it doesn't go up percentage-wise faster than the sales go up. And again, a lot of this stuff is handled by your point of sale system, so we want to make sure that we just understand the formulas and that kind of stuff. And then, as I said many times, the food cost percentage is determined by managers. This is the area, this is the number or percentage that we want to hit over the next 2 months, 1 month, 2 weeks, whatever the case is, and they put that in play, and you as somebody that may have that responsibility, try to match that out. Questions here? So let's put an example to that. So pizza, right? Food cost for the month is $8,500. Food sales is $27,490. So our food cost to buy all the ingredients for all the pizzas that we sell to get it in our inventory is $8,500. What we sold to our clients, our guests, and our takeout or whatever, however you operate your pizza joint, is $27,490. So that's pretty straightforward, right? So we take that $8,500 divided by $27,490. We get a food cost percentage of $30.9%, not dollars, but 30.9%. So what's that mean to us? Well, what that means to us is that our profitability for every dollar that people spend, we make a profit of 69 cents. That's pretty darn good. If we can keep our food cost percentage in that ballpark, that's pretty good. Depending on the type of restaurant that you run or the food that you offer, that can be higher or lower. But again, pizza joint ingredients aren't tremendously expensive. But if you can run that food cost percentage there and your profit margin is 69 cents to every dollar, I think that's pretty darn good. Now, we're always looking for ways to lower that or raise that even more, or keep the food cost percentage as low as possible, which will make the green part, the 69%, go up. But again, that's what we're looking for. That's the responsibility of somebody that's in charge of purchasing and making sure that everybody on the team understands what we're trying to accomplish. Did I go over that too fast? What questions do you have on that? Okay, either not being honest with me or you got it. cold and I'm the best teacher of all time. So here we go. So some of the factors that affect food costs, pretty straightforward, right? If we have a sudden change in our menu offerings, if we've republished or redone the menu and we've got stuff in inventory based on the old menu and those types of things, that's going to affect food costs, right? Because more stuff's going to be on the shelf unless we've done a really good job of incorporating the stuff that, even though we've changed the menu, we've incorporated the stuff that might be on the shelf or that we've ordered, right? Your sales mix of menu items could certainly hamper that. And then the raw product costs, so whether they go up and down from your vendors, which you have to keep a close eye on. So I'm not saying you have to monitor that every week, but from time to time, you have to really look at what your costs are from your suppliers and make sure that you're shopping that around without the potential loss of quality. There's been a few classes that I've taught where somebody has changed suppliers on the type of burger, the burger patties that they have. It turned out to be a pretty fruitful switch to where the burgers were a little bit smaller, but in relationship to the cost per burger, it was much less, and the clients or the guests didn't seem to notice. Again, that may not happen in every situation, but you always want to make sure that you're monitoring, tracking, looking at everything as far as, especially if you're in a responsibility of purchasing, that type of thing. So as we said, food costs increase or decrease with sales. Just makes sense. Standards and controls are set by the manager, or it's handed down from management, and the manager has to make sure that everybody abides by that, because that's how they're rated and evaluated. So standards are the expected outcome, right? We're all trying to hit certain percentages and certain numbers. And so if you share that with the team, they have some accountability and buy-in, because they're saying, okay, I understand we have to make sure that we're trying to get to a certain standard, and maybe we're not going to be lackadaisical with some of the ways we use food, or we're more careful on how we prepare food and those types of things. And then controls really are the tools employed to achieve and maintain standard. If not followed, and again, this is the recipe, the portion devices, all that stuff. If it's not followed, food costs will not change in direct proportion to sales. They may be higher because all of a sudden we're not measuring things properly. We're eyeballing stuff. We're taking shortcuts, that type of thing. So techniques for ensuring that standards are met by staff. So question for everyone, you can use the chat. If a staff member is having trouble in a specific area of the business, maybe it's food prep, maybe it's wait staff because you're so busy, would it be a better technique to step in and work more on the line if it's in the kitchen, or serve stuff as a manager, or would it be better to step back, evaluate, and teach? Who's got some? There's a lot of chats in there. Sorry, I didn't have my chat box up. So let's go down, and two should be the right answer. Everybody's doing a good job. Step back, evaluate, and teach, right? So Sam, you shared quick thought on inventory, making sure that everyone is counting it and counting the same way. And we'll talk a little bit about that in some future slides. I think today we'll talk a little bit about that, or maybe in part 3, but you're right. The curriculum doesn't cover that a lot, but we have to make sure we're doing it the same way, because a lot of mistakes can be made. I'm assuming that this is yes, but the final, with all these formulas, are we allowed to bring a calculator? No calculator they won't allow you to bring a calculator for these. So it'll really be scratch paper. You're able to have a notepad with being able to scratch paper, but no calculator. Okay, good job, folks. It is number 2, so let's keep going. So we're going to teach our team, right? Because if you constantly step in, you're going to always have to step in, right, when times are tough. That doesn't mean that there's not that unique anomaly that you just can't, there's not time to step back and evaluate and teach. But those should be very, very rare. So we need to have training, teach, evaluate, making sure that they're following procedures, that type of thing. So overall, remember that lost sales result in lost profit, right? So we don't want to shrink portion sizes. Who's going to be the first one to tell you that portion sizes are smaller? Your regulars, your guests, and the ones that have eaten with you before, and they're going to go, uh-oh, something's happened. So maybe some of the wait staff or the kitchen has had larger portions, and now they've got the portions in line, and now you're going to get a little pushback because they're used to the larger portion sizes. So again, trying to be consistent because that's what the clients or customers expect. So if the food cost percentage is the same month after month, you guys are doing a great job in that position of understanding what's going on and that type of thing. Or you're extremely lucky. But month after month, if it's the same, usually you guys are doing the right things as far as the kitchen's using all the tools that they have at their disposal, wait staff using everything that they have at their disposal, and all the standards are being properly met and the numbers come out properly. Questions, comments here? So when you're looking at your food cost and your food cost percentage, you want to find the place where you can most directly affect food costs. Okay, so one way to do that is to eliminate waste. So from time to time, not every day, time to time, you need to teach on how to eliminate waste. Can we, if we're trimming something down, can we reuse that in another way? Those types of things. Or if we have overproduced, how can we use that overproduction of food in maybe a lunch special the next day, or something that can be used either in a chili or a soup or whatever the tricks of the trade in the kitchen are. Can we minimize our food costs and try to use everything that we have, right? Paige says cross-utilization. I'm not super familiar with that, but yeah, I think that's important, right? So trying to make sure we're using everything that we possibly can. So food specials, lunch specials, create waste sheets, right? Because you might not know that there's some waste going on, but if we're throwing something away, shouldn't we jot it down somewhere easy? Maybe put these waste logs at the near the waste basket, so when we throw something away, we can just kind of jot it down real quick. Because what we want to do is recognize patterns. Might not mean anything at all. The waste was the waste because it was not usable. But it's easy to, if we're just throwing it away and we're not writing things down in a log of some type, then we'll never know if there's a pattern of somebody throwing something away and they didn't know. It's just something that they either weren't trained on or they forgot about, that type of thing. So creating those waste sheets could help minimize waste if possible. Questions, comments here? Okay, calculating and affecting food costs. So we're going to explain how managers forecast the food and beverage sales, describe how to calculate beverage and food costs of goods sold. So as a manager, or when you get to be a manager, you're not only responsible for day-to-day operations, but you're also responsible for reducing costs, that's one piece, and then growing sales. Kind of two different skill sets, right? So we're looking and analyzing your P&L or your whatever financials and whatever dashboard you have, and then of course the time horizon that you're looking at. How can we reduce costs? And there's a number of different ways to do that. We've talked about those already. And then growing sales. How do we get more people in our dining room? How do we get more people when they're in our dining room to elevate the average ticket price? So again, number of different things that as a manager you're responsible for. So believe it or not, the food costs, which may or may not include the beverage costs, depending on how you guys do it, it will typically represent 25 to 40% of a restaurant's total expense. Just the food or the food and beverage cost. So that's a big chunk. So that's something that we really should keep an eye on. So when we forecast, it's really the process of how we estimate our food and beverage sales, customer traffic, and menu items. So there's a number of different things involved there. So again, how we grab this information, the best way is probably your historical data. And I was just talking to a vineyard and winery over on the west side of the state, and believe it or not, their opening week is within $100 of itself every year. Now, sometimes that's good because they're consistent, but is it possible that we can do certain things to get more people in our dining room or our wine tasting areas and that kind of stuff? But typically, you're going to go on historical data of where you've been. Industry analysis, sure. Economic trends, sure. You always have to keep an eye on those, but this is a great way to forecast what you feel you're going to do next week, next month, so that you can strive to hit those numbers. Questions, comments there? So an accurate forecast really helps make informed decisions, right? If we need to stop something because, we know we're going to be way over or way under, we need to make some quick decisions and predictions. Certainly helps give us insight, and then where there's room to improve, because maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we weren't looking at something that we should have been looking at. And again, based on weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly analysis. We can always go back and change our forecasts if something kind of crops up that you weren't expecting. But for the most part, you want to have a good, accurate forecast going forward, because that's what you're going to base your ordering off, your labor costs on, because you're going to have so many people in your dining rooms, in the kitchen, those types of things. So we want to make sure we're understanding what we're trying to accomplish. Now, we all know that, we can do a forecast and we get slammed because there was an event that was a half an hour away, and on the way through, they're stopping at our place and they're going to eat something or whatever the case is. Or we didn't remember, or we didn't take into consideration big event at our location, and now all of a sudden that's increased number of plates that are being served in the restaurant. So again, you can go back and change your forecast, but you're trying to stay out in front so that we can have a good handle. It's tough when somebody has to approach the table and said, we're all out of these 3 items. So it happens, but it's tough because clients are making that quick judgment. Big thing that you almost always have to keep track of. I really went ahead here. Let me go back here. In food service operation, the costs that make up prime costs are food, labor, and beverage. So we knew food and beverage, that was in our food costs, right? When you add labor, now those 3 costs are called prime costs. And it's extremely important. In fact, in a profit and loss statement, I ask my hospitality clients to pull out the prime cost so they can see it whenever they get into their profit and loss, because that's a good barometer of how things are going, whether we're on target, whether we're below that, or whether we're doing really well. So again, prime cost, extremely important. Remember, it will be on the exam. What makes up prime cost? Food, beverage, and labor for a specific time period. So obviously in any business, we try to keep the cost low as possible by budgeting expenses, but most important, if we can keep an eye on the prime cost, you are going to be well ahead of the game. So the cost control really involves monitoring that prime cost. Why? Is because budgeting expenses begin with reviewing data from prior periods, right? Again, could be the last period that you've just come from, or the same period last year, or the prior 3 years with some growth, hopefully. So we're really looking back. And again, point of sale systems will give us this information. Spreadsheets, software, apps, whatever you guys got, I'm sure you have that information at your fingertips. You just got to know where to find it if you don't know already. This might be scary to some. Evaluating the income statement, or what's the same thing is called a profit and loss statement. It might be intimidating, but it's really not. In the part 3, we'll go over what a profit and loss statement is, what it tells you, and really it's a lot simpler than people make it out to be. from that report, we can look and say, okay, improvements can be made here for the next period because of these reasons. So again, it's a great tool to be able to run and compare and contrast to, again, the same period last year, the same period 3 weeks ago, whatever the case is, and start making decisions based on that report. And remember that this is stuff that's already happened. When you get a profit and loss statement, it's already happened. So there's not a lot you can do to change that profit and loss statement, but you can make tweaks going forward that could affect the upcoming income or profit and loss statement. Certainly we want to review market trends so that you can anticipate surpluses or shortages, right? So again, market trends, is there a slowdown? Is there a situation to where, high inflation to where you're not seeing as many guests, or they're not ordering as much when they do visit you, those types of things. So a lot of stuff goes into this, very important. The more you do it, the better you get at it. It's not like you're going to come in probably equipped with having all the skills here, but it's a learning process going forward. And again, the point of sale systems and the software spreadsheets will help you immensely. So as we said, just a quick recap, the areas that you're going to look for good information when you're doing sales forecasting is really your historical data, your industry analysis, and your economic trends. Again, automated systems, point of sales, other systems and software, pretty straightforward. Projections to help you make the best informed decisions. Okay, again, trying to use all the data we can. We don't want to analyze analysis of paralysis of analysis. We don't want to get stuck. We need to make decisions. We'll make the best decisions we can based on the information that we got. So some events that could change our numbers, right? Weather. If you have some bad weather, especially in Michigan with the snow, people are not going to come out for that, right? Unless they're staying at your facility. Events in the area certainly could fill your dining room. Shortages of food that you normally order and it was unforeseen, may have to scramble, and of course there could be other anomalies out there. Questions, comments, thoughts here? Who knows what the top 3 things a manager typically is rated on? What do you think? Top 3 things managers are rated on. Budget, yep. Guest satisfaction, okay. Budget, got a lot of budgets in there. Anything else? Labor costs, right? Turnover, thanks Charlie. Turnover, huge. Right, Michael, thank you. And the cost of that. So great job. So staff turnover, number 1. Once you get the staff in-house, it's about the safety of your staff and your guests. And then, as everybody put in the chat, it's all about controlling your food costs, especially the prime costs, right? So making sure that that's all happening. We have 2 ways to kind of control food costs as far as the formulas, and that is what we call the percentage of sales method and the simple market method. And what happens here, it's kind of one is the reverse of the other, and I'll go through those with an example. So the percentage of sales method is food costs for a future period is estimated as a percentage of overall sales. So when we did that food cost percentage, remember that was 30.9 a few slides ago. Maybe we just want to hit that again, right? Food costs for a future period, or maybe we want to increase it to 32, or excuse me, put it down, got to go down to 29 and a half. If we can get our costs down, that means our profit goes up. So potentially that could be it, right? So we want to make sure we're doing some type of an analysis, and some of the big food items that you'll probably look at, break down your food cost by category. You'll want to look at your meat categories, your seafood, and your dry goods, right? So we know that if food cost is 50% and the sales price is is $2, our food cost is 25%. So that's under the 30% that we talked about. But again, can we do that with all the other food? Probably not. It's going to be an average food cost that we're going to look at. And then remember, you want to make sure you're tracking beverages separately because they're a different animal altogether. So if we're looking at, and let's put some more numbers to it. So if we're looking at our percentage of sales method, we know that if we want 7%, our 35, our cost of our dry goods divided by our total food sales, that we know that our dry goods probably are going to run around 7% of our total. That probably won't fluctuate a lot. If it does, we might need to look into it for some type of variance or error. But overall, you should probably know my dry goods typically run at 7%. My meat usually runs at 15%, just making those numbers up. My seafood runs at this percentage, and our food cost, sorry, not food costs, but our overall costs can be added together. So gives you a good idea, and you can really kind of pull those out and say, ooh, we got to 10%. What happened? Was there a big event? We had to order something. A price of a product that we ordered, typically it went up for some reason. Maybe there was an outbreak or a recall, those types of things. Questions, comments here? Okay. Moving on to the simple markup method, it's kind of the reverse. It certainly is a forecast. It's not percentage, right? But it's based on increase of a certain amount on last year's expense. So if we know we had an expense of a certain dollar figure, we just want to increase it. So but current budget period, food cost times the percentage of the cost increase is the projected cost increase. And a lot of times we just put 2 or 3% to be safe, but sometimes it can be more. But you're typically going to have percentages from management that tells you this is where we have to stay, right? So we're going to try to work that into our forecast. The next thing we do, our current budget for food costs plus the projected cost increase, that's our adjusted food costs that we're going to try to stay underneath. So we've budgeted for any inflation, we've budgeted for any increase that our suppliers have done, and we're going to try to stay within that forecast in our software or in our POS system. So putting the numbers to it. So again, 280,000 times that 6%. We know we're going to have an increase of cost of 16,000, and we just add it back, right? So now our cost is going to be $296,800. Pretty straightforward. We expect a 6% increase in our cost. Questions here? So when we're forecasting and budgeting, I hope that you try to include everything, but sometimes we don't. So most budgets don't account for everything such as waste. We won't never be able to budget or forecast theft. And then if we don't have good consistent training, then procedures are not going to be followed, and therefore we could get different food costs because we're eyeballing stuff, we're in a hurry, we're shortcutting, those types of things. So if we forecast or budget something down and we're over budget or we're under budget, whether it's significant or not, make sure that we document that, right? We want to document anything that affects the forecast. Certainly accounting for losses. We want to understand if it was indeed just a key entry error, that someone just made a mistake putting the price in, but you need to check that out, or if it was an increase somewhere that we need to take care of. So know our audience, right? Checking in with servers, know when they've had a bad day, because that might be the time that they shortcut, or they don't necessarily care about the procedures. They forget about training stuff. So communicate with their team, making sure you're checking in with them. Understand how much food is actually used during the time period. And then we get into utilization factor, which is the percentage of food actually served to a guest. So we know the raw food, when we start out, is going to be higher than the actual food that actually makes it to a client, right? So the actual cost divided by the uh, act- uh, um, I'm drawing a blank. Actual purchase price. Sorry, actual cost divided by the actual purchase equals the utilization. That tells you how good of you've used just about everything, or maybe there was more waste than there should have been, or there was just more waste than, and that was the way that's the way it is. So again, the utilization factor really gives you an idea on how good you're utilizing the entire food product that you have ordered. Questions, comments here? So sometimes these things can get in the way of not being reported. So cost of waste, that typically doesn't get accounted for unless we're using those waste logs to try to figure out what's going on there. But the waste just goes in the trash, right? So again, how can we be better? Any items that are not rung into the register, whether it's an error or somebody's doing it deliberately, over portioning and theft. All food purchased has to be utilized, right? Try to. We know we're going to have a certain amount of waste, but again, trying to do our best job of using everything that we've purchased. Cost of some goods go up, right? That's just reality. But the amount made on the item is still the same. We need to make sure that we're adjusting for that. Now, what gets in the way of that, if you have your food costs go up, there's a cost in pre-printing menus. So if your cost of the goods goes up, but you've not made an adjustment on your menu item, you're taking a hit. Your costs go up, but you're not getting the same percentage of markup that you would because it's a menu that's had that price on it for a while. So something to think about on how you prepare menus, how often you prepare menus based on fluctuations in cost of goods. So Paige is also saying buying seasonal items, right? So you can certainly utilize different menus and food, dishes with that. But again, is that a better cost? Is that a cheaper cost or a less expensive cost? Those types of things. So it's good to stay on top of that. Thanks, Paige. So pretty straightforward, right? As purchase cost, the actual cost, you get the food cost percentage. So just need to understand what that means going forward. It is 1:53. Come back at 5 after, and then we'll take attendance and we'll finish up the rest of the slides for today. So 5 after, 2:05. So food production, let's talk a little bit about that. So things we're going to kind of talk about are summarizing the procedures that many managers use to control pre-production and beverage and food product costs, okay? And describe the tools managers use to estimate food production. And if you guys do it differently, please don't hesitate to throw that out there either in the chat or speak up. So one of the main thing here that you really want to analyze is how much money did it take us to make the meal compared to how much money you got back from charging the customer. Okay, so that's really where it starts and stops. So if we certainly want to charge more than what it costs to make, but we have to take everything into consideration. And how wide is that delta? Certainly the production area contributes to food costs, right? Because there could be errors here as well. Tools to control food and beverage costs and limit waste, right? Want to use the right tools. And what is one of the principal causes of increased food costs? And it's really overproduction by the kitchen, but it's not necessarily just their fault because they were handed a forecast, or they were handed, meal tickets, and so they're only producing what they're supposed to produce. So communication's got to be paramount to make sure that there's not large errors that are made. So again, we want to use that historical data, compare us to every Tuesday night that we've been open in the summer for the last 3 months, or what did we do last year? Maybe add a little bit more. Are we increasing potentially marketing? So we're starting to see an influx of more people in our dining room. There's many different things that we have to make sure that we're taking into consideration. We want to make sure that we're using a detailed production schedule based on what our forecast is and the historical data that we base that forecast on. And certainly the sales forecast, right? Our census, our order history, all that stuff. We want to make sure that we're doing the right things. And listen, that doesn't mean that mistakes aren't made. They are, but how can we avoid making the same mistakes time and time again? So with that, the sales forecast really is the total customer count. So now we're getting into the actual customers that visit our facility. And then the sales forecast is the total customer count times the average check per person. And believe it or not, this isn't just hospitality. This is the average project per client. We use this mentality a lot. So the number of customers you got times the average check per person will tell us what we can expect based on historical averages, that type of thing. So we should be pretty close when we're trying to forecast what we're going to do on a Tuesday night for dinner. So we know that check estimates include a potential appetizer, entree, beverage, and dessert. But how do we estimate all that stuff? That seems like not everybody orders an appetizer or a beverage or even a dessert, right? Some people just drink water and they skip the dessert. Certainly just depends. So how do we average all that stuff out? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So we get this, once we get our arms around this kind of gives us an anticipated budget to work with for that given period, right? For this week, for Tuesday night, Wednesday night, whatever the case is. Your sales history really is the best predictor, but again, use some other tools that might give you some insight. Sales volume over the last 3 years broken by day of the week. So over the last 3 years, for all the Tuesday nights over the last, 3 years, that gives you over 100. I think it's 156 different Tuesday nights that you can analyze what's went on those Tuesday nights, right? So 52 Tuesdays in a year, and you get an average. And so you probably should be around that, or if things are going well, you're probably going to be above that. Okay. So it's our best chance of forecasting next Saturday's customer count. That's the best thing to do, is look back in your history. Using your point of sale system, you're able to track revenues, record items that were sold, what your most popular items are, that type of thing. The manager's looking at this information as well. So when they order, they're going to have the right products on the shelves and inventory so that we can make the appropriate menu items based on the amount that's been ordered in the past. And then report on the various areas of the business. So let's do an example of what an average check amount would be. So that formula, again, they'll give you this formula, but they want you to work through it. An average item price times the percentage ordered based on your operation sales history. So you're just going to look back in your history. That will equal the average check amount for that item. Okay, so let's do and put some prices there. So if we've got an entree and the average over looking at our point of sale system, the average for that entree item is $15.25. We know what we got. Entree average is $15.25, but that's not the whole story, right? What's the average contribution for appetizers? Well, not everybody orders appetizers. You should know the percentage of people that do order appetizers. So in this situation, we're going to use only 20% of customers ordered an appetizer. The average appetizer price is $6.45. So to put it in the formula, average appetizer price times the percentage order is equal to the average check amount overall. So numbers to that, if our average appetizer price is $6.45 times 20%, we're going to add an average check amount, $1.29, to our $15.25, because again, not everybody orders an appetizer, but we don't know who's going to and who's not. So we actually add in the percentage of those who do so that we can capture it all. Questions, thoughts, comments? Did I lose you? Okay. Same thing for the dessert. Not everybody handles it. We're going to make it really easy. If our entree average is $15.25, again, only 20% of customers order the dessert. Average price of the dessert is a little bit different. It's $6. So the formula is average price times percentage orders is the average amount checked. So that comes out to $1.20. So we're going to put all those together. We're going to add them all up. $15.25 for the entree, $1.29 for the appetizer, $1.20 for the average dessert. We get an average check total of $17.74. What's this missing? What's this missing, folks?
The drink.
The drinks, right? Your beverages. But we have to handle those a little bit differently, right? So depending on your facility, your operation, you might serve soda as a one-time charge and then refills are free. But we know we don't do that with alcohol. So how do we make sure that we take that into consideration, right? So again, another kind of twist on understanding your food and beverage production. So same type of formula, right? Average beverage price times the percentage order. And if it's alcohol or you charge for every refill of soda or tea or whatever you do, you need to put in one more variable, and that's the average number ordered. So you'll break those down if you have them separated out where one's, first one's cost and then everything else is free refill after that, but the alcohol needs to go in there. So average beverage sales, let's put some numbers to it. So if the average beverage price is $6.50 times only 20% of the people order an alcoholic beverage, if they do, and you may want to separate these out between soda and what the percentage of people order soda or other, because I don't think it would be too much different if they did lemonade or iced tea or soda. I could be wrong, but certainly we have to understand the alcohol because they could be ordering multiple. So in this situation, average guest orders 1.5 drinks. The average beverage sales is 1.95. So we add that 195 back to the average beverage price, and we get $7.95. You see where we do that? Yes, we have the average beverage price, but this is the percentage order, average number ordered, 195 back on top of 650 is 795. You'll see in the next slide here, the average bit check is 795. The food check average is 1774. So if we all add that all together, 2569. And I'm sure if you're looking at your menus in your restaurants, that's probably low for your average check average. So yeah, but that's how you do it. That's the process per customer. We need to know what the total check average is per entree, right? Because your entrees are going to vary differently. A sandwich is going to certainly be quite different than, a filet and that type of thing. So again, we need to have these formulas, and our point of sale systems will have all these things readily available. But, big but here, so after all that, we also need to know the customer count, right? We have to understand typically what type of population we think is going to hit our dining room, depending on the meal, right? So, and then that's just for one entree plus the dessert, plus the appetizer, plus the beverage. We might have multiple entrees, and we have to kind of understand how that all breaks up. But again, you don't have to do it manually. It should be able to have a report that can be pulled down for you to kind of analyze. So we talk about a thing called a popularity index, right? So that would be the percentage of total sales by the percentage by the customer forecast, and I'll show you that in a second. We have Sam say guest demographic can greatly affect the type of food that's ordered. Absolutely right, and certainly the type of day, the time of day as well. But yes, it will certainly affect that. But you have to break it down per entree as well. So if this is, and this is a very simplistic menu, but if our menu items are these 5 entrees, we know through our point of sale system what's been ordered. So 22% of our guests has ordered the chicken a la king, roast loin of pork, 18%, 15% for the broiled salmon with lemon, butter sauce, roast sirloin, and beef au jus at 35%, and vegetable lasagna at 10% to get a total. It should be actually up to 100%, right? So the next thing we need to do is pop in there how many guests total have visited our dining room. So again, we got these numbers by looking back at our history. We're going to get the total number of expected guests by looking back in our history, and that's what our forecast is going to be. So if a fine dining facility runs these on a Monday, we look in the sales history to see how many customers will likely come in on that Monday. So let's pick the number 180. And again, maybe there's some things out there, such as, is there some new competitors that have recently moved in? Is there sporting events or concerts, or is weather going to hit us adversely? But we're expecting for that Saturday night 182 guests. And again, I'll just reverse the slides. These numbers, oh man, Tom. These numbers over here in this area next to the right parentheses are just the percentage of clients or guests that ordered that dish. So out of 180, 40 guests ordered the chicken a la king, and so on. Questions? Okay. Any questions on anything before we get into labor? That was a lot, folks. That was a lot. So try to review some of the lessons. If you're not getting it, reach out, review the video once I post it. Make sure you understand just how the formulas work and the thought process going through it. Labor. So what are our learning objectives here? Explain how the payroll cost, the FICA, the Medicare, and employee benefits make up labor cost, right? And explain the cost of labor, how it affects our operation. What is payroll cost? Anybody want to swing at that? So it's just what you're getting paid. It's just what somebody's getting paid, right? The amount of money spent for employee wages. In an operation, they can be fixed. Somebody's on a fixed salary. They can be variable, or they can be semi-variable. And a combination of all three can certainly be there. So payroll costs are just this little guy right here. That's payroll cost. When we're talking about labor costs, don't forget everything that costs your facility money. Salary, FICA, any benefits that are offered, Medicare, workers' comp. Is there any other benefits that you guys get that we should have on here? Bonuses, any vacation, and that would probably fall under benefits. Yep, I would fall under benefits, but good. I care. So again, a lot of stuff going on here that we have to make sure that we are taking into consideration. Dental, excellent. So payroll cost is the gross total of the paycheck before taxes are deducted. So that's what we use. Gross total is before taxes. Net total is after taxes. That's pretty straightforward. Who pays the FICA tax, Social Security, Medicare? Who pays that? The business or the employee? Both. Nice. Both pay that. So each entity, the employee and the employer, have a little bit of that, or a lot of it of that, depending on your situation. Both the employer and the employee pay, okay? And again, employee benefits paid separate from wages. These could include many of the things you've already said: holidays, vacations, sick days, health insurance, life insurance, dental, company paid retirement plans, paid continuing education, all those. So again, those all cost. This probably won't affect you, but labor contracts that have to negotiate with unions, we have to take that into consideration. Typically, they're going to be on the higher of the cost side because that's negotiated. Usually in the large metropolitan areas, the labor contracts all negotiated. So you don't have much say or play when you're looking at this kind of stuff. So labor contracts, something that's negotiated, certainly could increase your labor costs from all these other things that could be part of the mix. Optimizing that labor productivity, so we're going to get into a little bit of scheduling and how we utilize what's going on. So here we're going to talk about how managers can optimize the labor productivity through training, coaching, and reducing the employee turnover. The reason I got this bold: give your staff the tools they need to do their job. That if there's one thing that's very frustrating, to come in and we don't have the proper tools, they're always looking for something or we're skimping here and there. We need to have the right tools for the staff. Certainly training helps improve skills and the knowledge of all employees, right? We know the difference between somebody that's only got 2 weeks on the job versus somebody that's been here 6 years. And it'll help in different areas, right? Improve skill and knowledge, productivity, lowers the cost. We don't have to redo stuff, less chance for error. And we certainly want to make sure that we're recognizing and rewarding employees. Develop employee capability to improve the entire organization's capability. Seems straightforward. Employee turnover. So that is classified as the number of employees hired to fill one position in 1 year. I don't know what you guys put that number at, but it is extremely expensive to interview and hire and get somebody up to speed on certain positions. Some more than others, but there's a cost associated with that. It's normal, turnover is normal because, of circumstances and that kind of stuff, but we don't want it to become excessive, right? So if it's excessive, that could be a problem. Celebrate and develop employees, that you already have, because again, to start over from scratch is very expensive. I don't know what you guys put it at. It could be $1,800 or more. So cost of turnover, $1,800 per open position. Again, you might be seeing different thing. And the main reason for employee turnover, because they're seeing management turnover, and that doesn't give them a lot of confidence, right? Unwilling to increase pay, especially for those people that are very good at what they do. You ride your horses, they schedule long shifts, but they don't get any, benefits for doing that. Bad relationship with their manager, no recognition for good performance, and lack of upward mobility. And sometimes that's unavoidable. You might not have open slots, and that's understandable. So we can get into coaching. I'm a coach. We help open some eyes on some of the things that businesses can do different. So I'm a professional that helps kind of decrease the bottlenecks, understand how to create a better culture, monitor your P&Ls better, those types of things. And it's really one-to-one staff coaching and workshops. Again, showing possibilities of upward movement if there is any available. Investing in talent development and managers transition. So if you bring in a coach, that a coach comes in and interfaces with employees, that can be a good thing. I was engaged with an electrical company, and I was engaged with an executive manager and his 3 technicians. We talked about communication and doing a better job of letting everybody know what's going on and that type of thing. Big thing is setting up your staff for success, right? Peer training, buddy system, those types of things, especially if you've got younger employees that can learn with really good staff. Now listen, if you got marginal staff, you don't want to kind of buddy them up with somebody, because you don't want the new employee learning the wrong way. So again, make sure you're making good selections when you're doing a buddy or peer system. If you're having some issues, or if you're not, try to examine why employees leave, right? How to avoid high turnover. Recognize good employees for the work they do. Not just, hey, Tom, good job. Sit them down. Tell them, that you appreciate the job that they did and what they did to benefit the company as a whole. So make it worthwhile and be sincere, right? Want to pay fair and competitive wages? If you have bonus programs, make that fair, that's reachable, that somebody has control over. Competitive benefits and incentives. Regular performance reviews, right? Usually it starts with a 90-day, and then you potentially can do one 6 months out after that, or you go right into your annual performance reviews. And listen to employees, right? They want to be heard. They want a voice. So, let them know if they give you an idea and you say you're going to run up the flagpole and it's turned down, come back to them. Let them know what the reasons were, that maybe it's not dead, but it's just not for now, and we could bring it up later. Or if it's an absolute can't do it, got to share that with them as well. But they want to know that they're being listened to. And then you yourself as a manager, find time to coach, right? Not control, not dictate, but ask questions. Ask how somebody should do it differently if you've noticed an error or mistake. So again, just to review, recognize those good employees, pay the fair, offer a fair bonus program, and offer competitive benefits. Other factors, lack of teamwork. If the culture's not good, people aren't going to stay long term. Lack of control, right? People are just not following your procedures. You're shortcutting everything, and it's just chaos, especially when you get busy and it's just difficult. You go home and you want to just, put your head, take a long hot shower, that's for sure. The quality of life, you want to make sure that people want to come to work and love what they do. Hospitality is one of those things that's in your blood. Poor recruiting, right? If we hire somebody that's marginal, they're probably not going to stay. And it goes both ways, right? The recruiting is broken on, and you guys might not have it that way, and I'm not outing Becca, but what I've seen most of the time is the process is not smooth. Do it differently every time. You don't communicate with the interviewee. So again, if it's not up to, if it's not quality recruiting process, then take the time to fix it and do it the same every time. But you guys might be doing it very well. Sit down with your employees and talk about long-term goals. Is there career opportunities at St. John's Resort? Or is there limited because there's not a lot of movement? You need to be honest, right? So, and then get honest feedback from them as far as what they're looking to do or what they would like to do when something opens up or an opportunity presents itself. Again, the culture, if you've got inadequate standards and people are doing the same thing different ways, the check-in process different ways, the whatever it is, inventory different ways, it's not going to be good for the organization as a whole. Work schedules. We're not going to go super in depth, but you need to know that this is part of your responsibility too. You got to schedule people in, and it's not as easy as everybody on your wait staff and your kitchen staff. They're all coming in all at the same time. You're busy in certain times of the day. So if we've got a table with we've got a spreadsheet with a total number of expected customers. We've got cooks, servers, a host, bussers, maybe if you do have those, and bartenders, right? So somebody's always coming in early to set up, to get ready. And as it starts to get busy, right, during the 6 o'clock hour, we have 2 cooks to take the pressure off. And then it starts to wind down and again, this is just an example. Servers, at our busy time, we've got 3 servers going on, but somebody opens, somebody closes, and there's a smattering of what we need going forward. Host, pretty much the same person. Bussers, working their butt off, that type of thing. And then bartenders, right? Got to have them here for the busy time of the day. Now we have to also understand the hours that they'll be working, what their average hourly rate is, and what the expectations of their total wage that we're going to pay them. So for 85 customers on a Monday night, we're going to pay the outlay of labor wages is going to be $447. And we want to make sure that it's within our budget or our forecast that we said, this is what we expect. This is how much we expect, because it's pretty well documented. That's what people are paying. And I know it's probably lower than it is now. But again, this is how it works. Questions, comments out there? Christopher, poor recruiting equals temp services. That's true. I mean, something's got to give, right? Okay, moving on. So that master schedule is a template that shows the number of people needed each position to run the restaurant or food service operation during a given time. That's just one night in the dining room. You're going to have different timesheets for every time you serve your meals, right? To make the best estimates for a reasonable master schedule, it also needs to consider current trends, things that are happening. Maybe those 85 customers, maybe it's bad weather, so we need to cut that down and maybe send people home because we're just not getting the population we expected. So after determining the anticipated sales, management determines the payroll dollars, which are the number of dollars available, which showed on the spreadsheet. But again, a lot of this stuff is done on your point of sale system, so you don't have to do a lot of figuring other than putting in the hours that you're going to have your employees work up to and when, and then that type of thing. A crew schedule is a chart that shows employees' names and days and times they are to work, right? We want to make sure that everybody gets a copy well before the time. So I'm not saying you publish it on a Friday for the next week. I'm saying, can you give them 2 weeks and set it up that way? You should be thinking that far ahead. And then what's your contingency plan? If you've been in this business long enough, you know you're going to get call-offs and call-ins and saying, I can't come, or somebody just doesn't show up. So what's your plan B? What are you going to do? Is there something that you have, or do you need to figure that out? Any questions or comments here? So that master schedule, really two primary services, right? To help ensure we have the right number of waged employees that are available so that your customers receive prompt, efficient service, and the food is properly prepared, right? That's the two main purposes. We want to make sure the guest service is top notch and that we're not falling behind in the kitchen. And then of course, to plan wage and labor expenses so budget goals can be met. So if I'm a manager, I get a budget goal, I have to configure my master schedule so that it meets all the criteria of good service, people that are available, double covered during our busy time, and then making sure that I stay on top of and when I can let people go home, because there's always an exception, always an exception. So the hours needed per person for specific positions, really hours time, it's pretty simple, right? The hours that they're working times the dollars per hour that they are negotiated at equals that total wage cost for them, and then you could add it up for the actual overall total wage costs. So that crew schedule is developed from the master schedule, and then the factors considered when making that crew schedule. Again, if you have people that work in your environment that are 14 and 15 years old, they have restrictions. So see on there that they are limited, and you need to keep track of that, right? Because you don't want any fines or slaps on the wrist for here. And then FLSA guidelines, want to make sure that we're following those as well. Questions, comments here? That manager, the general manager, is not an easy job. They're involved in a lot of stuff. So kudos to you that are managers, and then again, to step up into that position, just be ready. Then at the end of the meal, we have to collect the money or the credit card or whatever they're going to use to pay, whether it's digital, right? So we need to be able to identify and explain the three parts of the revenue collection system. So that will be on the exam. What are the three parts of the revenue collection system? Oops. Understand accounts payable impact on the operation, and then identify and explain internal and external threats to revenue security. Three parts. Charging the guest, making sure we get that accurate, everything they ordered. Collecting the revenue, and there's a number of different ways to do that. And then once we got the revenue, whether it's cash or credit, or I don't know if you guys accept checks still, but how do we protect that operation's cash assets? Not all the operations have systems and safeguards in place. So there can be movement or room to for sticky fingers. So some basic rules to implement, right? When you're charging the guest, if we're undercharging the guest, you're probably not going to have more times than not, you're probably not going to have the guest squawk about that if you undercharge them. But you are going to have somebody squawk if you're overcharging them because they've checked their bill and they're saying, that's not mine, or what is this, and that kind of stuff. So again, try to implement that, try to be as accurate as possible. Make sure that they look over the bill to make sure everything's accurate. And again, we're not asking you to be perfect, but again, you get better the more you do this kind of stuff. Who knows the difference between a gratuity and a service charge? Anybody? You can put it in the chat. We don't know that? Okay. A service charge is really a labor-related fee added by the management to be paid by guests, right? So you might see something based on your operations, and you have to be willing to explain it to guests because they may not notice it, or they may think that it's part of the tip. So you may want to explain what a service charge is so that you get your rightful tip. Questions, thoughts, comments there? Collect it. Collecting that exact amount of money that is on the guest check, including the taxes, right? Whether you use cash, apps. You got in the restaurant area, what type of apps do you use, if any? Yep, here's some chat stuff. More guests for maybe a party of more people, a certain amount of people being charged, and a lot of service charges and banquets. Absolutely, you got a little bit more charges with transportation and that kind of stuff. What do you use in your? Do you use apps? Do you use the device that approaches the table? How do you collect revenue the most popular way or the most way that's done? Everybody's probably left the classroom. Nobody knows? Nobody's in the wait staff? So reservations, but how do you collect the revenue? Do you do it via a device that you're at the table? Do you take their credit card? Do you use cash still? Do you take checks still? Thank you, Paige. Card and cash. Okay, so should be pretty straightforward. We also want to monitor, and this might be, you might feel this is a little invasive, but we want to identify all employees that collect the money, because if there's ever a problem, we want to make sure that their ID is on the ticket, on the receipt, on the check, or whatever you guys call it. We want to make sure that's done. We want to make sure that we're collecting the correct amount of money, right? Again, mistakes can happen, and then properly recording that transaction into your point of sale. Questions, comments, thoughts here? Hiring practice. We talked a little bit about, poor hiring practices or lack of training, yes, but the recruitment, making sure that that's up to snuff. I'm sure it is Becca probably does an awesome job. You want to make sure you're conducting a thorough background check, especially those that are going to handle money, but also because people are into your inventory as well. And then adopt that strict code of conduct, right? Post it, make sure all employees are aware of it, which is your employee manual. Because when I'm talking to owners and executives, when they ask me a question about, well, what if they do this? I always say, check your employee manual, because I don't want to supersede something that HITM says you need to do when you have something contradictory in your own employee manual. So make sure you're checking all policies and procedures, which are your SOPs, your standard operating procedures. Are they ineffective, or they lack internal controls, or are they clear, right? Be clear that the company has zero tolerance for employee theft of any sort, right? They stole once, they're probably going to steal again. So there's really no second chances here. You guys might have a policy that's different, but if I was to give you guidance, I would say if they stole from you once, they're probably going to do it again. And then distributed responsibility. There shouldn't be one person that's kind of in charge of everything. There should be controls limited to 1 or 2 employees. You shouldn't have too many either, but I would say to 2 employees so that one can check the other, and then make sure responsibility is spread out to create that system of checks and balances. So internal threats, right? Employees probably are the biggest threat as far as stealing. Been some scams that have involved double charging and employees working together in some sort of scheme. They get hired at one place, that they get let go because they're found out, and then they go to someplace else. But again, it's high level. They work together, so we try to make sure we catch that. Now, I don't necessarily buy into this, so internal controls are certainly something that you should do, but I don't create the internal controls because I'm looking to catch somebody. I want to catch somebody if they're stealing from the organization. This is what I don't necessarily agree with. The 10-10-80 rule, 10% of the people are always honest, 10% of the people are dishonest, and 80% are less likely to steal if they will be caught. I want to give humanity a higher percentage. I think that top one is a lot like 50 to 60%. I just don't think that 80% of the people are going to steal if they think they're not going to be caught. So I put a lot of faith in the human spirit. So you may differ, but again, it's always good to have checks and balances, monitor, watch for things, and again, you have to have if you're keeping track of stuff, sooner or later it's going to rear its ugly head. Thoughts, questions, comments here? Anybody had the dine and dash experience? Anybody? Does anybody in the room not know what that means? Yeah, you probably could guess. So somebody's distracting the wait staff. Somebody's distracting the wait staff, or the wait staff is gone for a significant amount of time and they just skip out. Typically, it happens later in the evening when a few drinks have been passed around before they come to your place. But again, if you're getting an inkling, and you always should have the common practice of visiting the table, especially when they're done eating, so that you can avoid this. Just like a driver's license, fraudulent credit cards, right? How do we know, right? Take it out of your wallet, turn it over, find out if they have a signature on there, and make sure they have all the information that they need on that credit card. This is not as popular anymore, but this still happens. It's usually with bigger bills, 20s on up. Counterfeit currency. Do you guys have security methods in place, whether it's the pen, infrared light? What do you guys use, if anything? Nothing. Okay. A pen. Yeah. The pen works really good. Kind of gives you that quick, hey, you know what? This is not good. Do you take the money, or do you give it back to them? What's your policy? check your policy. HITM suggests that you take that down. It's not going to be any good to anybody anyway. It's not like you're stealing $50. It's just paper. But check with your own policies and procedures. So with a credit card, you want to examine that credit card signature, compare the name and last four digits. I don't know what that can tell you. Input security code, and if you're wondering, ask the guests for an ID. Make sure they match up and they're not using somebody else's ID if you have suspicions. This next area may not be, does anybody have any questions there, by the way? Okay, this next area might not pertain to you if you move into the accounts payable area. Obviously, the biggest things for accounts payable, right? The invoices, timely payments, so something's not hanging out there, cash flow, and supplier payments, right? We want to make sure we're getting invoices, understanding that the invoices are correct. We do want to pay those timely, but we don't want to be reckless. And then worrying about the cash flow if a month's tight, and then making sure they get their payment in the time that they need their payment, which is usually a due date. So pay the bills on time. What document should you use to confirm your order? Really, there's two. The purchase order, what you purchased or what the organization purchased. So go to the purchasing agent, the accountant, or whoever does that, and the manager. And if you're checking in the inventory or the delivery into inventory, match the purchase order with the product with the receiving report. Because sometimes the receiving report doesn't match up with what is currently being delivered. So there's kind of a three things that you got to do: get the purchasing order, understand what's being taken into inventory, and check it both off the purchasing order and the receiving report, and report any situations. If you can, instead of paying invoices at predetermined schedule established by the business, not the vendors, which that means is that can you lump them all together in the first week or on a Tuesday of the first week, as opposed to you've got 15 to pay and you got 3 this week, 5 next week, 2 the next week after, and you're constantly feeling like you're paying this stuff. And it certainly depends on cash flow, but if you can get that all done and get it focused to where you're paying those on a timely basis and all together, I think it helps. Already talked about this. Make sure all the invoices that are paid are accurate, authentic. There is fraud out there, so make sure if you even suspect that something's not accurate, check, right? If it just seems off to you, check. So I'll minimize that amount of time and expense in processing account payable. Pretty straightforward. If there's discrepancies, right? If there's a situation, the purchasing agent should request a credit memo. And that credit memo is just like money. So the invoice amount needs to be recorded under the accounts payable. So that's what we paid probably, but there's discrepancies, and now we need to request a credit memo for what's not being delivered. I've got a chat here. Hold on 1 second. Check incoming product as well, right? A large purveyor sticker product in the warehouse and then scan it as it goes out as an inventory control. Absolutely. Sometimes the wrong sticker hits the box, and that's just mistakes that are made. And then I've gotten granola with a tuna sticker on it. That's not good, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing it deliberately, not trying to hurry through it, that type of thing. So excellent. Excellent, Sam. Appreciate your input. The invoice amount needs to be recorded under accounts payable. That will keep it in their face saying, you know what, here's our invoice amount. It didn't match what we got delivered. And so I'm sure somebody like Sam will report that to purchasing and say that we were shorted or we got over or whatever the case is. And then when you issue the payment to the supplier, you need to record the payment. Again, a lot of this stuff you may never touch. It just gives you an overview on if you move up into these areas, what to expect. Any questions about anything we talked about today? Yeah, protecting cash assets mean it is really, when you're taking payment, making sure it goes into your point of sale, whether it's a credit card, whether it's cash. Don't know if you still use checks. I know a lot of other restaurants are using the device now at the table. You want to make sure that when your cash assets are coming, they're paying the bill, that it gets put into your point of sale and is recorded properly. So that your all the stuff that we talked about today, if we don't get accurate sales revenue of what we've sold to the guests, it's going to mess up our cost of food, and cost of food percentage. So that's what we mean by protecting cash assets, preventing theft if we can. Again, making sure that you're doing inventory, not on a crazy schedule, but on a somewhat consistent schedule. And in the third installment of the financial stuff, we will get into an inventory and how we can kind of have duplicate systems so that we can record it properly. So Paige says 2 cases of Roma tomatoes sent instead of 1 case of Roma and 1 case of 5x6 tomatoes. Had to get a hold of the rep to come in and pick and replace. Again, mistakes happen. You'd like to think they're mistakes. You're hopefully not thinking that they're doing it on purpose, but document that thing. Because if it happens 3 shipments in a row, now you got a problem, right? Someone's trying to slip it past you. But typically it's a mistake. It's a one-time thing, that kind of thing. What else? Any other questions today? Okay. Next week, we're online. Again, we're going to have the ServSafe Protection Manager next week. That's week 7. Week 8, we're going to be back in person. And then on week 7, we're going to start having you guys present your projects. We're not going to get through them all, but we're going to have you start presenting your projects so that we can get that done. Other questions, comments now? Got one. Sam says, Steve and I worked at a place that used an Excel sheet to match credit cards and cash receipts to the employee at the end of shift. And I'm guessing it worked, right? So kind of a duplication of efforts if you did it that way to be able to check at the end of the night. Good stuff. Okay, folks, that's all I got today. Have a good rest of your Wednesday, good rest of your week. Reach out if you have any issues.